Every day, we're surrounded by design. But how often do we think about those who spend hours designing our world? And beyond that, how are the creatives that design our world treated? How is their creative energy cultivated and encouraged within the larger profit-driven capitalist system? If it's not being properly cultivated and encouraged, is there a better way? My guest today is Jesse Rademacher, and he's CEO and co-founder of Madeium, and Madeium is that better way. Madeium is a new generation freelancer platform that brings together top design experts to build brands, products, and experiences. It is also the world's first blockchain innovation network that hopes to be the release valve for pent-up creative frustration. Jesse and his team have been building Madeium for the past 3 years, and I personally feel humbled to have met Jesse in this moment. The idea of design has been around a long time, and it's this history that has and will continue to inspire Madeium to create the future, and not just think outside the box, but altogether create a new one. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi and Water. Jesse, welcome to Wi-Fi and Water. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. Appreciate you having me on.
That's an amazing answer.
It's the truth. I mean, it's the truth. There's a lot of things that we can all complain about, but really at the core of what we're doing with Madeium, there's a lot of positivity. We're very optimistic about the future of the world, not because we're seeing other people do things, but that we've done these things ourselves. So over the last 3 years, Madeium has been basically building a new design industry that's a peer-to-peer design industry over the last 3 years. And it's just starting, it's been like the world's best kept secret, but we're finally after almost 3 years now, like starting to trickle it out on Madeium.com.
I came across you guys on Instagram and I was like, because when I came across you, this was I believe it's a Web3 NFT cryptocurrency peer-to-peer network platform consultancy. They're trying to basically put a lot of creativity in the room and see what happens. So where am I wrong? Where am I right?
Yeah, well, so you got most of it right. There was a lot of jargon. And so
a lot of jargon.
Let me just explain where we are. I think like with your last podcast with Nick Widmer, you said something about a lot of your, I was going to call them clients, but guests, right? A lot of your guests are really smart. And I think the hardest part of being in the crypto space and in the NFT space is that we don't ever want to talk down to really smart people like developers, right? Like I'm not going to go head to head with like a developer on like a debate, right? Like that's not my space. I'm a designer and Madeium is a design community. So all that jargon, we try to just get rid of. You know, we try to make this conversation as plain, as simple as possible. So maybe without the jargon, we would say that Madeium is more like a design super union than it is a company. Okay, so right then and there, you can see we're flipping kind of capitalism on its head, sum total. So this is a very kind of broad topic because Madeium is really trying to harness the lost creativity in the world. So every maker or designer, we use these terms very loosely because we think anybody can be any of these things. But we ask them, what percentage of your creativity is used in your day job? Jarrett, what do you think the answer is? What do you think the community pitched back? Over 300 people in the community.
Okay, so I read your website where you gave this answer, but If I didn't know the answer, I would say, so you're saying on an average day, there's a designer who works in a company and he or she or they're designing. How much of their creative talent are they using? I would say, but once again, I think I read it on the website. I would say, however, if I hadn't read it, somewhere around 50%. I would give the benefit of the doubt that maybe it's 50%. And then there's like the corporate structure is crushing them a little bit. And then they have deadlines, which maybe is crushing them and something else. But is it 20? And I only say that because I think I read that.
So have you ever worked in a corporate design environment?
I have not. The closest I've gotten to this though, is I did go to the New School in New York and Parsons. I didn't study design, but most of my friends were Parsons students. And I cannot tell you the amount of stress I would see them go through all the time. And I don't know, as someone who creates myself in many different mediums, the stress of a deadline, that's just not fun. And I could personally speak from this podcast. Sometimes I don't do them every week. And that's just because I don't have the energy, creativity to like sit down and get it done. Like, I don't know. And I'm now we're just off the cuff here, but it seems like if you're trying to design or you're trying to create, and it has to be something that you absolutely want to put in front of other people and you want to put your name on, it doesn't feel right that there's a timeline. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. So, okay, I've spoken too much.
No, we agree. I think you're putting your finger on just a piece of it though. Okay, timelines, sure. But as a professional designer in any professional environment, working anywhere, you're always going to be working on a timeline. The difference is who's telling us what to do? Who's giving us the brief, the so to speak brief? Okay. And so right then and there, yes, the answer that 99.9% of creatives all over the globe, and this didn't matter where they worked, like what brand they worked for. So it was Nike, Apple, Google, Tesla, Wieden+Kennedy, IDEO, like the biggest design organizations in the world, most lauded. And the same answer from their workforce, it matched up no matter what other company in the world the person was, or if they're automotive designer or UI UX designer, or if they're an industrial designer, a graphic designer, it doesn't matter. And so it was maddeningly consistent. And I don't know anything that you can't get 99.9% of people to agree on anything in the world, except designers know that the structure in which we work is in a very antiquated structure. And so what Madeium is doing, what we really are trying to do at our core, is that we think that there's whole new ways to organize creative capital, creative power. And if 20% of creativity is mined currently, we don't need to increase the amount of creativity in the world. We just have to figure out how to harness the lost 80% of creativity. So you start to see that we've been building from that perspective for 3 years. And what it kind of amounts to is the infrastructure for a peer-to-peer design industry where no longer do creatives have to work in the quote unquote corporate patronage model that we currently work in. It's a 140-year model at this point, that Taylorism, Frederick Winslow Taylor, and led to the Industrial Revolution. And if you start tracking history and you just look at it from really clear perspective, you'll start to notice that nothing in the industry currently makes any sense at all, the way it's organized. Because if creatives are feeling like their creative souls are being crushed in a corporate environment, and they'll tell you about it, just ask any creative and then we think that there's 80% and they're going to go home, they're going to do another project, they're doing something else to balance out what we call, like you said, the timeline thing. We call that being a professional. You're not going to escape it, right? So at the end of the day, we have to find ways to tolerate the current environment, right? So we're creatives. We're usually very introverted. We think very deeply. We also, to be a problem solver, you have to be a problem finder. And almost like it sets up this weird kind of psychological game for creatives, the people that are professionals, because it's creativity on demand. You'd never get to turn it off. And you always have to outdo your thing you did last time with no more added resources or time, right? So you just have to one up yourself all the time. And, naturally in a corporate environment, creatives, it's very different than the way an executive thinks. So we're always thinking about the executive. And quite frankly, I speak truth to power. I've talked to people like Mark Parker and CEOs of Adidas and all these big companies. And shouldn't executives be fired if they only get 20% out of their entire workforce? How is that a good ROI on that side either? So who's winning in this current, situation where ideas, if you look at Taylorism and Industrial Revolution, the design capital is stuck in that system still. And if you look at that system, it's a system based on efficiency, right? So if you've ever seen, have you ever seen I think it's called The Founder, like Ray Kroc and
Oh
the
yeah, the
McDonald's stuff?
one about McDonald's where he goes and franchises and
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have, and I know this is just a verbal podcast and I'm a visual designer, so this is a little challenging, but let me try to see if I can bring this thing to life. You know, when the founders were on the tennis court and they were drawing in chalk and they were trying to figure it out, that's Taylorism. It's the people are just a piece of machinery. How do we make that machine as efficient as possible? Let's throw out anybody that needs skilled labor, right? Because they're just a piece of the machine. So this is how the middle class came to be, is like eliminating craftspeople and replacing them with a human piece of machine. And you can drive costs down for labor. You can pass that savings on to the middle class. And it worked for that long, but it's not working today. Because in that system, once you set up, Henry Ford did not change the Model T for 12 years because he just wanted efficiency. So any bright idea working at Ford for 12 years never even had a chance to be heard. And so we're still, like, creative capital, sum total in the world, is being harnessed only at 20% in an antiquated system, when we know 600 years ago, the creative renaissance in Italy was a patronage model from the Medici family, and it got way more creativity out of the world 600 years ago. So what we're really trying to do is spark that next 200 to 300 year period in human history, where all we're doing is accessing the technology that currently is out there today. And the way we think about harnessing that energy is that lost 80%, nobody needs to tell those people what to do. They're already the professionals in the industry doing it for everybody else. Madeium allows them to just do it themselves and with their friends and with their peers, in profit sharing, in all the blockchain technology that we brought in. We are on like 4 or 5 different blockchains because we're always adding them, because we're technology agnostic. So I hear these people always talking about like certain blockchains as if it's like there's going to be like a battle to the death, and there's going to be like one blockchain and like one metaverse existing, and we're all, from the client perspective that people are trying to figure out this space. It's like, no. Like if you chose AOL or Netscape, you lost either way. We think that the future looks like a myriad. It looks like millions of options. It's like abundant that people will just be able to tap into based on whatever they need at that moment. Creatively finding capital if that's what you want, but we don't like to build projects that way. We like to do it in profit sharing, give everybody skin in the game. If it works in market, everybody's happy. If it doesn't work, well, you really shouldn't get paid much.
So I'm a designer and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, he has just put his finger on the problem that I have when I go into my office. Because as you said, I have to be a professional. Therefore, I have to meet efficiencies, and I'm part of this capitalist framework. And maybe the way my creativity works, it doesn't fit within that framework. How can I, as a designer, now that I've heard the podcast, how can I reach out to Jesse and be a part of the Madeium network? And what would that look like?
First of all, you can email hello@madeium.com. Made is our name, right? So it's in our name. We kind of think of it as the one-stop shop to get anything made, because all it is a community of the world's best designers. First and foremost, all we're doing is giving them access to each other. Like, can I please work with some of my friends rather than always working like at the behest of the client? Like, don't you think that I might do more interesting projects if me and my friends can organize and figure out how to, and this is kind of what we set up, right? So I guess let's step back for your listeners here, back to that 20% question, because the very next question after they said, usually it would come with a grunt and a disgruntled, my job's shit. I don't know, maybe 5%, I don't know, 20% max. I know that, Well, the next question, obvious question is, you sound really unhappy in your day job. Like, sorry, I was there. Sean, co-founder, happens to be my brother. Between us, we have almost 40 years of professional design experience. And we felt that like to leave a corporate environment, we had to like start all over in our careers as an independent like design entrepreneur. So we were like, well, that's shit. There's no real support out there. And the phrase design entrepreneurship is a double-edged sword for us because we have to do all the design, but we have to be the entrepreneur. Wait a minute. Are we fighting with other entrepreneurs that get to spend 100% of their time being an entrepreneur, and we're trying to do it like half of our time and trying to do high-level design? So like just these things just did not add up to a system that would help get more, just harness more creativity, right? So we had these personal experiences ourselves, but as any good designer does, you don't design for yourself.
How big is the community right now? Because I assume that there are people across the globe that are part of this. And I was on the website and trying to suss that out, try to get an idea of how global the reach is. But it seems like Madeium, there's no reason why any designer anywhere in the world couldn't join and add to the network and just add to the potential possibilities.
Again, we're contrarians like all the time. So like literally we built Madeium by kind of going, what could like no company do? No company can operate not trying to get profit. Like if you don't operate from an exclusively profit-driven motive, you're free of that entire system, that whole entire logic of like organizing things in the world. We're completely changing that and going, you don't need the upfront investment. I think maybe it was Nick Widmer in your previous one that talked about like, and you talked about it in the setup, is that you're interested in the intersection of things, right? So Madeium is built on the intersection of things too. You said like cryptocurrency. How do you say this podcast? What did you tell me earlier?
Yeah, so I would say to somebody, it's like the intersection of cryptocurrency, the climate crisis, and the communities that kind of surround those two things. That's what's fascinating to me.
Okay, so think that like Madeium's community of designers has those exact same ethos and missions naturally because we're designers. Okay, so here's the pain point is that if a company is only getting 20% out of what I can do, and we're people that really internalize our work, they're squashing most of what I can do and what I can be in the world. So like just from that position, it's like the way things are organized for corporations, it's very different from our motivations. So right then and there, we always want to solve for the end consumer. And when we're designers and we go to design school, they say solve for the end consumer, solve for the end consumer. They say, Jesse, you're not designing for yourself. This is industrial design. You're going to make 1 million of the things you design. Like you're not the consumer, design for everybody else. So I made a career and went to schooling, and all the teaching through institutions is about how to solve, first of all, find the consumer, how to analyze a problem through their eyes and all this stuff. The difference with Madeium is that nobody ever gave us the ability nor told us that we could use our own design process back on our lives and the industry with which we work. So that's exactly what Madeium did. So right now we built this foundation. It stretches all the way from software. Software is easy to scale. We want to decentralize, obviously, as many things as possible. When we started this, we built it for 2035. We said, what is going to be the standard in 2035? And that's where we were like, it doesn't look like a corporation. This looks like a decentralized network, access to technology, equality, transparency, merit-based pay, profit sharing. Like I could go on and on and on because that's how creatives want to work. So when they tell us it's shit to only get 20% out of, we say, why do you stay? That's the next logical question. Why do you stay in a job you hate? And then they told us the answers. And most people in the world, most designers, doesn't matter where you are, we all have the same problem. So if we figured if we could solve these for ourselves with software and open source principles and sharing of knowledge, we think we can actually get to, and we think we built the system, the underlying technological system to harness that lost 80%. And it's about giving people power directly as individuals. So rather than accruing technology and innovation and patents, which we are doing, we don't get those to hold and to hide away for 20 years so society can't realize the benefits of it. I actually just posted today on Instagram, like, again, Nike and Adidas fighting over who owns a patent. And it's like, is it not time to open source some of these ideas? And rather than locking them away for 20 years. So when I worked at Adidas, I was innovating in footwear and innovation, and was doing knitting and footwear. I had to navigate a 500 patent Nike minefield for knitting and footwear. Society loses for 20 years. It's not to bring 500 patents to market, it's to make sure nobody else does. It seems like the whole approach is very cynical. If you look at it from the perspective of creatives and innovators that are just trying to create positive change for the future.
Yeah, because in that framework that you just spoke about, you're trying to create a shoe and you have to navigate the minefield. It doesn't allow you to fulfill your duty to the end consumer. If you're constantly being tripped up by these tripwires, we're using tripwires and mind metaphors, but I think it's a really good one because you're just trying to get from point A to point B and do it in a way that's creative, but you can't because there's all this, to be honest, legal framework that's blocking you in patents and seems like IP.
But I wish it was just legal. Legal is like one of 15 ways creativity gets tripped up from the designer to the end user. So this is like the double bind that we live in as professional designers is everybody, including our employers, are saying design for the end consumer, design for the end consumer, design for the end consumer. After being a design director in one of these big organizations for a decade, the consumer lost so many good ideas because there's a meat grinder. There's an idea meat grinder, which is the corporation. And I'm not pointing out one corporation. What we're pointing out is that it's a systemic issue and it does not matter. Every single corporation that's organized by these old principles of extracting value from the creative community and placing it on the stock market, that's a way to exploit creativity and to exploit me and my friends. And I'm very passionate about this because there's some like serious righteous indignation here. Like, I'm tired of getting screwed over as a creative. I'm tired of all my friends getting screwed over and everybody else profiting off of their creativity except for them, except for a measly salary.
So it sounds like you and your brother, you and Sean, have been feeling this way for a long time. You're not outside of the vacuum of the 20% and feeling like 80% of you, you're taking that home with you. And you're like, well, I'm going to have to do something else. Why did it take you and Sean so many years to kind of leave this community or the corporate institution community that wasn't allowing you to fully create? And then it seems like, you said, I'm doing amazing and I can see it all over your face and I love it. Now you must feel a sense of unbelievable freedom that you've never felt. And you must be getting near the 99.9% of full creativity. And what are you saying to your other friends that are still in that corporate institution, which I'm sure they have very nice paychecks. I'm sure they have very nice benefits. And they have many of the things that maybe society would say, hey, good on you for having, rather than stepping away and doing something that's a little bit, when I say outside the box, I mean like 1,000 miles away from the box.
Man, I don't know how to link to the box reference. I think that the most important thing here is to know that meat grinder that never gets real pure concepts to market, it's over. What we've built it circumvents. So what we did is we just cherry picked the best parts of the industry. And those are the people we operate in first principles, right? You know about first principles, tear it all the way down. Don't operate on assumptions. I still see, I think it's like, I mean, what's the sneaker industry? $100 billion industry. I mean, if Nike's trying to be a $50 billion industry themselves and they maybe only own 25% of the global market, like, do the numbers, right? I'm not the numbers guy. But this thing is, if you start building something for 15 years from now and you don't have any fiduciary responsibility other than setting up something that can outlast all of us and just try to use what is already available. And I think that that's like the super interesting thing is like Sean and I held this in for so long because at first, and this is what's been the hard part, you know, about being a design entrepreneur is this would have been a million times easier if we would have just taken outside money. Like, I mean, a Madeium right now would be 10 times bigger. And you asked about our users would probably have exponential growth by now. If you're planning something for 200 or 300 years, we're not in a race. And that in itself is very different from a way a corporation works. I'm sorry. I was a director. I was an executive at a $17 billion company. I was in those meetings. And I thought that all these high level meetings, like they were just missing this whole future. And I tried from the inside to show it to them. And I got rejected and I got ostracized. And so like you see that these things beat ideas down. And so we first think that if you have the ability to create value in the world that somebody else is able to see value, and it's not just monetary value. This is the old system is just, they're all monetary questions. We value other things like sustainability and quality and equality and transparency. As designers, we don't design, never have I ever met a designer that said that they got into design because they wanted for-profit record profits, right? Or record shareholder value. Like that's not our metric. But in that other system, that's the only metric. And so once you get outside of that metric, all we did was like, wait a minute, tear it down. Who's actually creating the value? And we see a corporation as two halves that we're trying to separate, two halves that we're trying to drive a wedge right in the middle of.
You've got on one side, you've got the company. On the other side, you've got the brand. And these two sides of a corporation haven't been questioned of whether they could actually be separated from one another. And that's really kind of the crux of what we are doing as Madeium, is that we think that the company side is all the executive pay, it's shareholder value, it's HR, it's personnel, it's property, it's IP, it's patents, it's tax filing, all that stuff. Well, all that stuff costs the corporation money. If these are the people that are supposed to be like saving the company money or either making the company money, why don't they look internally at their side of the business rather than always putting all the pressure on the brand side of the business? Because now, for the first time in human history, the brand side that creates all the value for that corporation, all the emotional connection to the end consumer, the lust for product or an experience, something that actually touched the soul of somebody, is all created by the brand side. Why does the brand side work for the company side? The company side just, again, you see that it's creativity that's been organized for the gain of others. And this is what is really scary to us about the future that we see right now of all this like NFT and blockchain technology. It's being organized again to exploit creatives. And I know that that's really hard to think about because we are all so happy that this technology exists. But there's some real severe detriments to this technology. And as creatives who are thinking about the long-term health of the world, we don't think like a proof of work like model. We don't believe in destroying the physical world to build a digital one. And if we're building a digital world, we think it has to work in harmony with the physical world. And we're product designers. We're experienced designers. Like, this is a network and a community of the best designers in the world, because we don't think design is even. We don't think all design is equal. Not all ideas are equal. Some concepts really shouldn't exist in the world. And as creatives, as the people that are behind the scenes doing all this work for the corporations today, and we rationalize it ourselves, we rationalize these things of why we tolerate situations like that. As an industrial designer, I know that I make the material decisions on something. But I know when I make that decision in a corporate environment, if there's a recycled material that's 5 cents more per product, it's getting the axe just because of those 5 cents per unit. In a designer's world, when you built the whole thing to be eco-sensitive, the very last thing you would ever think about is saving 5 cents on a product that's $50 to make. Like, these ratios are just obscene. And you start looking at the brand side is the key to the future. It's the company and it's the corporation side that's tying us to the past. And Madeium is that wedge between the company side that's living in the past, literally 140-year-old principles. And yet all this technology in the world now exists, and they are organizing us, the creative community. They right now are organizing us, and they are organizing us employer versus employer, where employees at certain brands, like, you can't even talk to your friends.
Really?
A fear of violating. Like, if I'm a footwear designer at Adidas and you're a footwear designer at Nike, like, you're one of my friends. Like, I've been in the industry for 15 years with you, and it's kind of risky to, like, get up with you. Like, because if we go to a coffee shop here in town in Portland, where you have the world's biggest and best designers and shoe companies based here, what if I'm seen at the coffee shop? Like, I'm supposed to be in competition. Everybody thinks that me, the design director of Adidas basketball, isn't friends with the Nike basketball design head. But we are, because we're creatives. Like, there's very few people in the industry that have the experiences that we share. At different companies, sure. But you see the model in which, if you think about creativity the way we think about it, it's a natural resource. It's a renewable resource. It's a resource right now that is misunderstood, because that resource is always being applied to something that it's really not meant to be applied to. Ideas are living in an environment that are meant to crush ideas. Like, it just does not make sense. So if you just take a big step back, this doesn't have to be a super technical conversation. You just go, well, every dynasty fails in history. So people say, oh, how are you going to compete with this and this? I don't care. I'm actually not competing with anybody else. They say I, but we. There's a whole team here at Madeium. And what we are is a service model to creatives. So we only exist kind of like a co-op. So that's our wedge, right? So if we think we can drive that wedge between the brand side and the company side, well, you still need the resources of the company side. There's still some good things about the company side, but if it's not being organized for executive pay and shareholder value exclusively, nothing else matters in that situation. A good idea will never make it to market if it's not going to make money. Like, that's just the reality. Where we believe that there's a lot better ideas and a lot better solutions for humanity, for society, to amplify, like, that natural resource. All it is inspiration. It's collaboration. So if you look at the way creative capital is organized globally now, it's that corporate patronage model, and it's exclusive, employer versus employer. All we're doing at Madeium, strip it all down. How do creatives want to work? And that's what we built back up. And so for the last years, we've been building this whole different approach to NFTs, to blockchain, to linking the digital, the physical, and the experiential are really all just the same thing from a designer's perspective. We just need more outputs for our creativity. And that's what we built, is a way, it's the home court advantage for ideas. It's meant to find the next thing to get an idea out of Jarrett's head or out of your listener's head. We all are brilliant. You have a million amazing ideas. You talk yourself out of telling other people about those. How much creativity is lost in the world just because you don't think it's going to get accepted, or you don't think there's a funding source, or you will find a reason not to do it. But what we've built and the principles of Madeium is that we're rapid innovation. We worked in big companies, big global companies, teams. I've led a team of 35 designers that are all over the world. And it doesn't matter where that creative is, it's the same situation. It's really upsetting, I guess, if these are your friends. And the raw story of Madeium is that I was driven to depression, clinical depression, because of the conditions of being a creative in this environment. And when I looked around, it didn't matter where I interviewed, I was just going to that same place again. And so nothing changed other than a logo and a boss. But the system was the same. And I saw enough of the system to know that, first of all, I don't want to be a part of it. And it's actually doing me damage. It's affecting my health. It's affecting my family and my children if I'm not present or something, right? Like, Sean and I worked in that system for close to 40 years. And you want to know the heartfelt soul of Madeium and how and why we think it has to remain so pure in concept is because me personally, was driven to like a deep, dark place because of the design industry, what you put your finger on, creativity on demand, never having a break, having 8 bosses in 4 years. Like, it was just like, time the fuck out. I'm done with this. And Sean and I had been thinking about founding a company for like 20 years. We're brothers. We've been like drawing together for 30 years, and we've never worked together. But we just wanted to do something, between ourselves to get out of that corporate environment. And so always are saying to other people, what we practice, what we preach, what we tell other people about: build your off-ramp. Don't quit your day job. Build your independent off-ramp now. Because LinkedIn is great, but it's terrible for designers. So what we built is like the concept that, like, to really capture that 80% lost creativity, we need a system that honors all aspects of a creative, instead of them, hey, show up to work and make what I want you to make. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I think I talk with people all the time, and I have a couple people in my circle, and I just am blown away by their creativity and brilliance. And oftentimes, unfortunately, and this isn't a reflection of them, it's a reflection from the greater society, which is kind of like the corporation that you're talking about, where many times we're so driven to think about, like you said, 2 things: executive pay and the shareholder. And so for each individual person walking around on the planet, the executive pay is the salary and the shareholder is the benefit. Like, I have to stay at this company because they have 401k and great benefits. And I'm there like, what if you didn't have to focus on that? Then what would happen? And I think the fact that you guys are you're saying, well, let's create not profit driven. Let's create and see what happens. Because once you strip that away, I think it's amazing. And that is, to me, everything you've just said is how I approach this podcast. Once again, we're going to get meta because I'm talking about the podcast, but it's like, I'm just trying to get to 100 episodes. And along the way, I'm trying to have as many great conversations as possible and just enjoy the process.
Who's setting that goal for you?
I'm setting it just because it's a round number. That's it. And it's nothing that, like,
but it's a self-driven goal.
It's a self-driven goal. There's no one telling me I have to do it.
Every creative in the world is self-driven. We don't do what we do to please other people naturally. Usually, if we're competitive, it's with ourselves.
And I think every single designer is their worst critic from the friends that I know in UX and UI. They will obsess hours before they have to show the team, their boss, or do their screen share because now they're working from home with, oh my God, is this right? And one of my friends, I'm going to call her out. I hope she's listening to the pod because it's about designers, but Vanessa will obsess. And I think that that's great though, on some level, and in a sense that you're striving because you're going to put your name on it. But the other dark side of that, as you were talking about, is it can lead to mental health. I don't want to say disasters, but it can lead to mental health problems. Or am I totally off the wrong there?
No, I'm not a psychologist. I have my personal experiences. So maybe this is a different podcast, but I can say like pretty confidently that designers they exist in the world by what they create, right? So the designer, I don't like to promote myself. I like to promote what I made, because usually what I made is probably better than what I think I am. Right? Does that make sense?
I guess it makes sense. And once again, I'm not a designer, so I'm trying to understand what you're saying. But is this why, and I know this is going to be out of left field though, is this why Kanye West is so difficult for people to deal with? Because in many ways, he's a designer and a creative, but he's actually more obsessed with himself than maybe what he puts out in the world.
Oh, no, I would disagree very strongly.
Okay.
Because I've worked with him.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people that work with him. I got nothing for love but for Kanye. And I'll say this, interestingly enough, since you brought Kanye up, I'm not a name dropper, right? Like, again, like I don't want to promote myself. I want to promote what Madeium is, because myself, it's like history. Like, I worked on this shoe, I worked on that shoe, I worked with that celebrity. Like the most important thing is what you learned in those relationships. Right. And that's the thing that carries on to the future. And that's what Madeium's meant to do, is to share knowledge freely, open source knowledge. Naturally, creatives don't want to work in a employer versus employer situation, because those are our friends. They're just on the other side of a legal wall or whatever the wall is that they, right, the corporations rectify in between us, the creative community. They're telling us currently how we can organize ourselves. And there's things that Kanye is doing that people just don't understand yet. So
that to me makes a lot of sense.
You see him getting media attention. Yeah, he's really good at that. But he's playing a long game. He's thinking about his mark on history. So what if he pisses off somebody today? He's such a high level creative that he surrounds himself with the highest level creatives. Think about Kanye. Is he doing it for money?
I do not believe he's doing it. I don't believe he does a lot of things for money, but maybe I'm wrong.
No. Well, money is a part of everything. You can't separate it in business. That dude will go to $1 billion valuation personal. And then he'll spend 800 million on some. I'm throwing out numbers, don't quote me on these. But the point is, he's willing to risk any money that he's ever made to do the next project. Just get to like that thing. And I know there's some things actually that are very similar between Kanye's thinking, is because he wants to employ as many designers as possible. So he surrounds himself. Like, think about it. Who doesn't want to work with Kanye in no matter what field it might be in? Kanye doesn't need anybody else. He could do it himself. I think he realizes that he actually talked about the Medici, the Medicis. It was a family that patronized the arts. He wants to be the modern day Medici. He wants to employ more creatives in the world. So I think that those are the things you don't see. Is that like 5 or 6 of like my most respected footwear design colleagues work with Kanye. And it's because of the environment that Kanye creates, right? A creative environment. Kanye is not telling them that they need to meet certain sales goals, right? So some of these exist, but they're rare, right? Some of these opportunities where like money isn't the main driver. And those are rare. And we want to amplify those voices and those opportunities, right? Because if you think Madeium is really, we're just design advocates. So if I can have a conversation with Mark Parker at the end of the day, because we're building our whole system in like profit sharing and royalties for creatives on the blockchain and NFTs long term, I've already had people at these big companies say, we're already seeing a brain drain. Why do it for the company when they can do it themselves? And Madeium has built this whole new innovation ecosystem where anything is fair game. Do the designers want access to anything in the world? People think we run a very complex business. It's super simple. We don't have conflicts of interest. All we do is go, hey, that's a cool idea. Does it add value to the creative community or just even one creative? If so, let's go. Like, let's have some, let's see if we can get bulk purchasing on that thing. Let's see if we could get that company to sponsor and give the 3D software away to the community, right? Like there's value exchanges at whole new levels. And I know you have guests that can talk about macroeconomics. I actually really like talking about macroeconomics too, but I can say it very simply, is that I don't need to talk about the existing macroeconomics because Madeium built new ones. Think about that. If you cherry pick the best parts of the industry, the creatives, the sources of value, and not value just in dollars, but value in this whole new set of like mission and purpose and reason to do something new in the world. And you take all the restrictions off and you have levers. And just to give you some examples of what we built, I don't want to be too vague. I know we're talking a lot about principles, and that's our why. But the how is just organizing the highest level designers in the world. And the biggest thing that our community is different. I know you mentioned Fiverr on your last one. I got a bone to pick with you there.
That's
we
fine.
Actually think that's a really cynical business model, because what they're doing is they say they're a design community, but they're putting designers in competition with other designers to drive down the price of our craft and what we do in the world to pass on those profits to the clients.
That's totally
not a system that is built exclusively from the perspective of the creative.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's why people go on Fiverr in the United States, because they've just started their company and they want to get a logo, and they go to a local graphic designer that says, yeah, it's gonna be $1,500 and I'll do a couple edits and I'll do a turnaround a week. You go on Fiverr, you can find someone from another part of the world. It's just geo arbitrage, where you're taking advantage of the fact that they're not on the dollar probably, and you're able to get it with really quick turnaround, because $15 logo for somebody in another country is like, a couple of days work and they can get it out in an hour or two. So while it does create, I think, opportunities, the flip side is it is a total race to the bottom, because the demand, there's way more supply than demand, and therefore the price will reflect that.
Yeah, so you can see how our perspective is different, right? Like, I mean, unfortunately, you just said race to the bottom, and that's the future that we fear. Somebody was interviewing, they said, why do you wake up in the morning? And it's like, to fight for the future of the fucking world. What are you talking about? Like, is there anything else worth doing if we have the ability right now? Because designers don't predict the future. We create it every day. Like, this is what we do. We're in a time warp. I'm used to working on 2, 3, sometimes 5-year projects. And the corporation hates those projects because they want quarterly profits. So even like the time horizons that we operate on are just vastly different. And we think that allows space, right? Space for people to think for themselves, to think with a peer. So the way that we operate this, and this is super cool, we just use the blockchain to us is just a way to secure creative IP. That's all. It's just a server. I don't want to talk about tech. This is not a tech conversation. I'm talking to those people that are trying to understand what blockchain and NFTs are. A blockchain is just a server. You upload it, It's a ledger. It keeps like your house. Go down to City Hall. You can see all the history of your house. This is just digitized. But as a creative, I implore creatives to just register their creation. Just immutably timestamp your thing before you put it on Instagram, before you put it out into the world. Because that timestamp, if you ever want to go actually file a patent or a copyright, those things take like 2 years. Claim it today. You made it today. Go ahead and claim it as your ownership. And then an NFT is just the way you sell that ownership off. Or, we have ways to splice and dice your IP. You want to sell it for the digital world versus like physical reproduction. And that's where things start to get really exciting in terms of like talking about this whole ecosystem that we built. We use the same technology, all the same blockchain as everybody else in the world. But for 3 years, we've been organizing those pieces of technology only from the perspective of the people minting the token, the people who are the generator of that content. And what we see now existing in the NFT marketplace, we think it's really bad, to be honest. Like creatives think that this new tool is like great for them, right? It's this great new tool. But there's a lot behind the scenes that they don't know. And just for your audience, there's 2 main things. This is like a public service announcement to other creatives. So I appreciate the platform to talk to other creatives. But if you guys don't take anything away from this, just know that when you're operating on like an Ethereum exclusive marketplace, if you mint on one of those sites, the buyer of your token has the legal right. This is the way they organize. This is the old model of organizing again, capitalism, right? Privatize it all. Ethereum's private. Every website on Ethereum's private. There's all kinds of private entities. This is the only way, for creatives to interact. But the way they organize it is they took our IP and they actually gave the rights to the collector when they buy it. So that collector can take that NFT and all they can do is sell it on a different Ethereum marketplace that doesn't respect the smart contract. And these 3 pieces of technology, blockchain, smart contracts, and the NFT itself, they're all 3 immutable, great pieces of technology, but they've been organized in a way where it's the relationship between those 3 pieces of technology that is mutable. And so what ends up happening is they'll tell you, I'm not going to call out names here, but top 10 Ethereum websites, right? For the most part, they'll tell you that you'll get 10% on secondary sales. But if you read their legal, it says 10% on secondary sales that happen on our website. And oh, by the way, we're going to legally indemnify ourselves against your losses so you can't sue us when you finally find us out. Oh, great. Another system set up to exploit creatives, right? New technology, old thinking of ways to organize around that technology. And so we built over here this like the exact opposite. If you're building a system for 3 years using blockchain and NFTs, don't you think we've solved problems of severing royalties? Like that's the first and foremost. It actually never occurred to us that we would ever even build a system that would allow that.
It's actually really crazy because the systems you must be talking about are the ones that everyone who's listening uses, myself included. And I'm excited to go look and read more on that because that totally takes away from the beauty of what the NFT wanted to do with the royalty structure. And it's very snaky. And like you said, it's using new tech with an old mindset, which how far does that actually take us?
It takes us to the point that, like, I mean, granted, there's a lot of good applications for Ethereum. And Ethereum is just one of the blockchains that we host, right? Because what we did is like build kind of like a choose your own adventure to like the design industry. So we never thought like, well, if we're creatives ourselves, if we're building this really for ourselves, secret, right? Like this is the thing we wanted when Sean and I wanted to leave our day job. So Granted, if we build it for ourselves, we can give it away almost really cheaply, right? With the tech and the software side. My background is in physical making of product and scaling innovation and technology. And so that's kind of where these two worlds collide, to go all the way from digital physical experience and connect these things in a new way, and just give creatives options along the way. Don't have one solution, give them options. And so that's where, like, adding different forms of payment. We're trying to scale this technology. We'll take US dollar. I mean, you want people to get into the NFT space, but they first have to figure out how to buy Ethereum. And when they do research about Ethereum, they realize, like, Ether, the currency, has the energy use of a 4-person German family. Each transaction, 4-person German family for a month. Like, from our perspective, like, as designers, like, you cannot destroy the physical world to create a digital one. And then what they did over here is organize creativity again to just really be exploited. And that's where, like, Madeium is just so novel in its approach. And I can't find anybody that's willing to do what Madeium has done, and the risk financially that we've taken. And oh, by the way, we have been working on this full time for 3 years to go, I want to give it all away at the end.
It's a super rare project, and the year is 2035, and you're looking back. Where do you think Madeium is? Where is Madeium?
You know, that's so interesting. We built this for 2035, but we never asked ourselves where we would be in 2035. So you're asking us, like, if we're thinking like 2035, where will we actually be in 2035? That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that, but I could tell you what our hopes are. Madeium, we operate in our ideals. And we ask creatives, like, it's really hard to explain to them multi-blockchain infrastructure, right? And I don't care to. I just want them to feel the difference that it makes in their life. And so I'm more interested in getting people in to experience these things firsthand. And hopefully they make their lives just a little bit better. And ultimately, what we kind of set out to do, I think it's impossible, but we had to, because there are so many things that are possible today. And congratulations to anybody listening this podcast, and to Jarrett. I feel really blessed today to be alive. I think that we are living in the most profound shifts in human consciousness, in systems, and organizing global infrastructures. And we finally have the tools to do this pretty easily. Nobody else in human history can say that. To answer you a little bit more specifically, 2035, I guess that looks like to us, like, if we can measure creative happiness, we've started with 20%. In 2035, I hope that number is something greater than that. That's the goal. How much greater? I have no idea. Will we be able to harness 100% of creativity in the globe in 2035? I don't know, but that actually sounds like something we wouldn't want to do, because we're looking for the best ideas, and the best ideas can get lost in harnessing any idea. So I don't know what the future looks like, other than, to us, it looks public. That's the biggest difference. We're reserving access to the greatest resources in human history, not just for the corporation, but for you as an individual. And all it takes is organizing ourselves and coming together over the next 3 to 5 years. Madeium has a plan to set up self-governance models and hopefully decentralize as much as we can. But we're going to work with this creative community to determine what that looks like. It's not us making up those decisions. It's going to be the engagement of high-level professional thinkers and doers and, like, thought leaders. And so we just want to instigate that conversation of what is the ideal way in the next 3 to 5 years for this community to move forward. But then by 2035, hopefully it looks like just reinforcing and sharpening these perspectives, because what we built is all circular. Our logo is the Ouroboros, which is an ancient symbol for the cycle of life, birth, life, death, and rebirth. And that's the way we think about everything that we do. We think about product, end of life cycle, right? What happens when that product gets thrown away? That's called circular thinking, right, in design. But that's also how we set up Madeium from a financial perspective. If you're not extracting money out of the system to invest it or to give it to shareholders or people outside, other people that are not creating the actual value, well, then you take that and you just reinvest it. What happens if we as a design community are reinvesting project profits, not all of them, but just a portion of them, to go and fund new ideas and new startups? That's macroeconomic thinking, because the VCs and people, like, they want in, but if they're not actually contributing, like, we can kind of do it ourselves now. Sorry, right? So that's the power shift that, like, in 2035 we hope to see, is that the design industry, we're very Madeium here at Madeium, we're very inspired by the architecture industry and what they did like 50, 60 years ago, is that the building industry was in shambles. There was fighting, there was lawsuits all over between contractors and architects and builders and finishers. And the architects, as a professional organization, just banded together and they anointed themselves the top of the industry, and they wrote the legal documents for the whole industry to abide by. If that happened 50 or 60 years ago in architecture, what the hell are we waiting on? The future is going to continue to look dystopian as long as we sit and wait and actually participate in it. And like, when I'm speccing a material as a designer, I've got to take responsibility. I can't say, oh, the corporation's going to take the recycled off. No, fight for that recycled material, right? Like, these big changes can only happen with small actions. And I think that's kind of the premise of what Madeium is built on, right? Is, yeah, we've got Madeium.com, which is, think of it like as like the LinkedIn for professional designers, where you get to honor all the projects that you're doing make up you as a designer, and it moves with you. And we assume that you're going to leave your day job or take on freelance or become hopefully in our system, become a design entrepreneur, right? Because we've eliminated all those hurdles. Like, there's ways to launch projects with no upfront money, no investment whatsoever, with a team that's built in profit sharing, that's deeply committed all the way through the project, as if their pay depends on it. And so, like, there's some metrics I think you talked about of like 10 hours of time to me is budgeted. I know what I charge, and when I get into a client, they pay me cash. But when I go over the 10 hours, when I'm on the 11th hour, I'm losing money because I'm not supposed to be messing with that client. I'm supposed to be working on the next client, right? So it doesn't really, that kind of structure doesn't really make sense. And so what we've done is we've created that kind of incubator for ideas and for professional creatives. So people that want to join Madeium, think that first and foremost, we are not into growing as fast as possible. We're all about quality. Everything we do is about quality of solution for humanity, for design. And the first people that we really want in the system are the professional designers. And what that means to us is the people that can execute their vision.
So if people want to find more information about Madeium, reach out to you, what is the best way to do that?
Madeium.com, at Madeium Made on Instagram. Discord's about to launch. We're just starting to ramp all this stuff up. There's live on market.madeium.com. There's live NFTs right now. Go and bid on them. These are all just peer-to-peer. I mean, these are just individuals coming together to make cool stuff in the world. If you appreciate what they do, make a bid and show them. So that's the way that you can support the arts and these independent designers, is just show the love. And we promise at Madeium that when you buy an NFT here, that like there's some real value in these NFTs. There's some sort of IP rights attached to them. You're not getting we call the other system, we call them hollow tokens because they think it's a new asset class by itself. Our tokens are like Gordo, right? They're fat. Dude. They're stuffed. We try to stuff that pinata with as much good stuff as possible. And sometimes you have to buy it to find out actually even what's in it. But I promise you, we're always looking to build community. And the way that we build community in these spaces is by exceeding expectations.
Well, thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Cheers, mate. Have a great day.
Thanks again for listening to this episode, and a big shout out to Jesse for hopping on the pod and sharing Madeium with all of us. Be sure to follow Madeium on social media. Their Instagram and Twitter is MadeiumMade, MadeiumMade. And be sure to click on the links in bio to join their Discord. As always, please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter at Wi-Fi and Water Podcast. And no matter where you're listening, be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you feel so inclined. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode and have friends in the design world, go ahead and share it with them. Thanks again, and see everyone next time.